all to the chasnis, and I'm going to just put it in the lockbox right now. Schön. Aufgepackt. Okay, it is with immense pleasure that I introduce our speaker for tonight. Freida, when you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much, and thank you for the schos. It's a very big schos to Farbrengen for Gimmel Tammuz. So I saw where the Rebbe tells a story that einer, after the stalkers of the Freida Rebbe, einer hat dann geschrieben a brief, as I'll say in Yiddish and I'll translate, as sind the stalkers, is sehr zu brachen, und sitzt einmal in a Zimmer und weint. The Rebbe writes, a fellow writes me a letter, that since the stalkers of the Freida Rebbe, he sits, he's despondent, and at times he finds himself sitting and crying. So the Rebbe says, at the Farbrengen, the Rebbe is telling the story, the Rebbe says, did the Rebbe das gebeten von him? Is this what the Freida Rebbe wanted from him? That he should be despondent, that he should sit and cry? And take away time from his shlichus, especially Erev Shabbos, Akvasa de Mashiach, and the last moments before the Geula, and hold back the Geula even by one rega, 1 minute? Is this what the Freida Rebbe wanted from him? Is this what the Rebbe wants from him? Which segues into another point, which we've shared the story, but by the 6-Day War, and now Eretz Yisrael is at war as well, the chief rabbi of Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, told my father that he was in contact with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe wanted to know what is the temperament of the Jews in Eretz Yisrael. Was sagen Yidden jetzt? So Rabbi Lau said, Yidden sagen, was wird sein, was wird sein. So the Rebbe said, Yidden sagen nicht, was wird sein. Yidden sagen, was kann man tun? Jews don't ask what's going to be, what's going to be. Jews have to ask, what can I do? What can I do? So now we come to Gimmel Tammuz, 30 years Gimmel Tammuz, and it's very easy. You meet another Chassidus and you say, 30 years, can you believe it? Mashiach still hasn't come. And you give a good Chassidische krech, and you go weitergefahren, and you feel good. But is this what the Rebbe asked of us? That we should be despondent and we should cry? What the Rebbe asked of us is, and we have to ask ourselves, and I'm asking myself the same question as an opening, is what have we not done yet? Who didn't we speak to? Who didn't we reach out to? Which mitzvah, which miftzah? What didn't we do yet that we could do to bring Mashiach? This is the question, I think, that we have to ask ourselves right now. The Rebbe always wanted action from us, always wanted action from us. So this is what we have to ask ourselves. What have we not done yet? Because when the Rebbe says something that happened with the Freida Rebbe, you could be sure that it is relevant to us. So now we find ourselves 30 years. So there's a sikha that the Rebbe said in 1980, Tafshin Mem, 30 years after the histalkus of the Freida Rebbe, quoting the Freida Rebbe's Farbrengen 30 years after the passing of his father, the Rebbe Rashab. So the Rebbe, just to reiterate, is sharing what the Freida Rebbe said 30 years of the histalkus of the Rebbe Rashab. Now it's 30 years after the histalkus of the Freida Rebbe, and the Rebbe is quoting the Freida Rebbe, that we're now at 30 years. And you might say, as it says in Pirkei Avos, ben shloishim l'koyach. 30 years is when a person reaches the pinnacle of their strength. So what does that mean? We can now stand on our own 2 feet, right? That's what it seems. Says the Rebbe in the name of the Freida Rebbe, no. That, what does it mean, the 30 years? We have to look at our connection and his kashrus to the Rebbe as if we saw the Rebbe yesterday before Gimmel Tammuz. In other words, our connection and relationship with the Rebbe has to be as if we saw the Rebbe yesterday and 30 years did not go by. And what's the Raya, the Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe share? Because a shepherd never leaves his flock. So you might say, wow, 30 years. And the Rebbe, both the Rebbeim said, no, you have to look at the 30 years, not in the counting of the years, as if you saw the Rebbe yesterday, before Gimmel Tammuz. That's how strong our connection has to remain. Now, this is not in the Sikha, but this point came to mind. Tell me what you think. That we know with Almighty God, with the Rebbe, God is not bound by time. So for us, 100 years by the Rebbe could be keherify in a blink of an eye, a millisecond, a half a second, right? So our 100 years by the Rebbe could be in a second, because the Rebbe is infinite and not bound by time, which is a limitation. Now, the Rebbe, in a sense, is no longer bound in the physical world, not bound by time. So we may look at the 30 years, wow, 30 years. But by the Rebbe, the 30 years could be 1 second, 1 minute, a half a day. So this underscores again how our connection and hiskashrus has to be not like, wow, look how much time went by, but like we saw the Rebbe yesterday. The connection must remain strong, must remain fresh, and as if we saw the Rebbe yesterday. That's how we have to look at the 30 years. That's how we have to look at the 30 years. Which brings me now to something else. Notice whenever you talk to somebody, you're going to the oil for Gimmel Tammuz. The kids are coming in for Gimmel Tammuz. Nobody says, you're coming in for the Yom Histalkus? You're coming in for the Yom Hilula? No one says that. No one says, you're coming in for the Yartzeit? Everybody says, you're coming in for Gimmel Tammuz. Right? I think. What do you think? I mean, yeah. I mean, I know. So I thought to myself, why is it that with Gimmel Tammuz, we can't bring ourselves to say anything other? And I realized, you know why? Because what did the Rebbe write about Gimmel Tammuz? So I looked it up. The Rebbe says so many times, Gimmel Tammuz, Yud Beis Tammuz, is the universal Chag HaGeula for everyone, because the Frierdiker Rebbe was freed from prison. So everyone celebrates Yud Beis Tammuz. And the Rebbe writes, but Gimmel Tammuz is the Yom HaGeula of the Chassidim. It's a personal Yom Geula, because that's when the Frierdiker Rebbe was actually exonerated for his crimes against the Soviet Union. So the Rebbe says Gimmel Tammuz for Chassidim is a personal Yom HaGeula. So what does this mean? It means that Gimmel Tammuz has the nitzutzim and the sparks and the energy of Geula. We didn't see it yet, but we'll see it. But Gimmel Tammuz, that's why. We can't look at Gimmel Tammuz any other way, because the Rebbe said it's Yom HaGeula. So we can't look at it and say it's this, it's that, it's Gimmel Tammuz, it's Yom HaGeula. That's what the Rebbe says, that's what the Rebbe writes. So that's our whole approach to Gimmel Tammuz. That to sum up these 3 points before we move forward is 1, what have we not done yet? 2, it's not 30 years. It's like yesterday when we saw the Rebbe in 770, envisioning ourselves there. And we're the generation that saw the Rebbe. And 3, Gimmel Tammuz is Chag HaGeula. Do we see it this second? No, but it's there. And when the Rebbe says something, we know it's going to happen. We know it's going to be actualized in reality. So now I wanted to share some highlights of different things about the Rebbe. One of the things I wanted to share was, what is a Rebbe? A Rebbe is Rosh B'nai Yisrael. Now, why is it called Rosh B'nai Yisrael? We don't say Nasi. We do say it, but predominantly we call the Rebbe Rebbe. We don't say Nasi Hadar, Manig Yisrael, Melech Yisrael. We say Rebbe, Rosh B'nai Yisrael. So I think I'll share a story that might highlight, maybe 2 stories. So it was Erev Pesach, and the Rebbe sent a message to a shliach in Europe to bring matzah to a Jew in a little hamlet, like a little village. So the shlich sent a boche. He comes to the hamlet, comes to the village, asks around, there's no Jew here. It's a little village. I'm telling you, there's no Jew here, everybody says. One guy says, I think the baker in the bake shop is Jewish. He goes to the bake shop. He asks for the baker. He says, you're Jewish? He says, yeah. He's in shock. He says, well, the Lubavitcher Rebbe sent you matzah. He gives him matzah. The guy bursts into tears. And he tells the bacher the following story. After the Holocaust, he ended up in this hamlet, in this little village in Europe, the only Jew, very lonely. And the last few years, the Galach got hold of him, the priest, and starts to harass him. You're the only Jew. There are no Jews left. You're going to convert to Christianity. I'm going to match you up with a nice Christian wife. You'll have a family. You'll have children. You won't be lonely. And he's harassing him. Finally, the baker says to the priest, I'll let you know. He goes home, looks up and says, Almighty God, I'm giving you 30 days. 30 days, you either send me a sign that I'm not the last Jew, or I really have to convert. I can't live like this all alone anymore. He looks at the bacher. He said, today was the 30th day. Today was the 30th day. And he moved to Eretz Yisrael. He became a Baal Tshuva. He got married and he had children. So you say, how does the Rebbe know? Is the Rebbe a Navi? The Rebbe is a prophet? Of course. But how does the Rebbe know? Like, give me a little bit of a logic here. Because that's what a head is. If you stub your toe, if you break your pinky, it's the extremity. It's removed from the brain. It's not even so important you could live without a pinky, chas v'shalom. But the brain, the head, feels the pain, even if it's in the lower extremity, even if you crack your nail or you stub your toe. The brain, the Rosh, feels the pain, even if it's far removed from the top of the head, and it's not life-threatening. And that's what a Rebbe is. A Rosh feels someone's pain, someone's sorrow. You could be crying somewhere in Winkel, the other end of the world, but a Nasi, a Rebbe, feels that pain and knows what to do for that person. So that's what a Rebbe is. That's what a Rosh B'nai Yisrael is. I want to share another story. And if you've heard the story, tell me, we'll switch, because sometimes I don't remember where I told which story. So if you heard the story, please interrupt me. I don't want to bore anybody. Story happens like this. There's a beautiful couple, a young couple in Eretz Yisrael, happily married, very much in love, beautiful marriage, beautiful shalom bayis. Month after month, they cannot have a child. They don't know what's wrong. The husband is heartbroken. He feels it's his fault. He says to his wife, I'm going to give you a get. You'll remarry. You'll have children with the other husband. She says to her husband, I want you to divorce me. Give me a get. You'll remarry. The Rebbe will bench you with children with another wife. And they're both heartbroken. They don't know what to do. But eventually children is, people love children, want children. So very reluctantly, with tremendous pain, they get a divorce. And by some fluke, 3 weeks after the divorce, she finds out she was pregnant and didn't know it. There's a big problem now. He's a kohen. She can't remarry him. But it's an unusually crazy situation. So they go from every gedolei, every Paisik in Eretz Yisrael asking for a heter. They go to every bezdin. No one can find a heter in the Shulchan Aruch that he should remarry her. You're a kohen. There is no heter for this. It's a horrific situation, but we cannot find a heter. No Rav, no bezdin. They're both despondent. They don't know what to do. They cannot remarry. He goes to his Rosh Yeshiva. He's a misnagdisha younger man. His Rosh Yeshiva says to him, you need to go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe in New York. You need to fly down to the Rebbe and ask the Rebbe's Eitzah. He says, Rebbe? Chassid? Chabadnik? I don't believe in that. It's not for me. He says, really? It's not for you? Is there any other solution? You have something else? You're in the most terrible predicament here. Go to the Rebbe. What have you got to lose? He buys a ticket. He goes to the Rebbe, gets online for dollars. He tells the Rebbe quickly the story. The Rebbe looks him in the eye and says, Red mit the mama. Speak to your mother. Speak to my mother. He flies back to Israel. He doesn't speak to his mother. A few weeks later, the Rosh Yeshiva says, no, what happened with the Rebbe? He says, ridiculous. The Rebbe told me to talk to my mother. He says, why is that ridiculous? He says, first of all, my mother is in a senior home. Second of all, she has a touch of dementia. And thirdly, if I tell my mother what happened to me, she doesn't know, I'm going to kill her. I'm an only child. I can't tell her. He says, really? The Rebbe told you Zafred mit the mama and you're not going to go because you have all kinds of excuses. What have you really got to lose? You are in a terrible situation. Okay, he goes to the mama. He quietly, calmly, kind of tells her what happened. And he asks her, and he tells her, and the mother bursts into tears. And she says to him, Bis nicht kin koyen, mein Teirinkin. You're not a koyen. When you were a little newborn baby, we knew your parents and we adopted you. And we knew your father. You're not a kohen. So he remarries his wife. And Benjamin Klein meets him at the Oyel 13 years later. And he meets Rabbi Klein and he tells him, he says, why are you here? He says, I'm here to thank the Rebbe. Because of the Rebbe, I have my son, Bar Mitzvah, here at the Oyel. This is Bar Mitzvah. If not for the Rebbe, I don't know where I would be, he says. This is the story he told Rabbi Benjamin Klein, who later repeated this story. So this is a Rebbe, a Rosh B'nai Yisrael, that a Rebbe knows, the Rebbe feels a person, knows what's happening with a person, is so in touch with every neshama, every person in the world, that the Rebbe knows exactly what they need and what they want and what they have to have. This is what a Rebbe, this is our Rebbe. Libby shared a beautiful story about the Turk sisters. I mean, I sat at the Oyel, stories after stories after stories. It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. It's really mind-boggling. The stories of the Rebbe. Really, really mind-boggling. Another thing I wanted to share is, we are very, very lucky, and we don't even know it. The Rebbe programmed us and gave us a way to look at things that no one else in the world looks at. We don't even realize how we think so out of the box because of the Rebbe. Like the concept of Hashgacha Pratis, right? Like I always teach Hashgacha Pratis in my women's class. Divine Providence, Hashgacha Pratis. And there's one lady, she can't get it. She keeps saying to me, what? Hashgacha Pratis, Divine Providence. I finally said to her, serendipity. Serendipity? She said, oh, now I understand. Serendipity. Hashgacha Pratis. Rabbi Sachs, the famous Rabbi Sachs, Olav Shalom, Sir Jonathan Sachs, chief rabbi of England, of Great Britain, when he in the early days, when he was in Cambridge University in academia, he tells the story. He was by the Rebbe for Yechidus, and the Rebbe says to him, "So how many Jewish students are there in Cambridge?" In other words, the Rebbe is saying to him, "What are you doing about the Jewish students in Cambridge?" So he says, "Rebbe, I find myself in a situation." The Rebbe says, well, hold on. You find yourself in a situation? A Yid doesn't find himself in a situation. A Jew is put into a situation. You don't find yourself anywhere. Wherever you are, the Eibishter put you there. You have a shlichus there. So the way that Rebbe taught us from when we were little kids, that everything's hashgacha pratis. Everything's hashgacha pratis. You have a flat tire on the highway, hashgacha pratis. You miss your flight, hashgacha pratis. We have hundreds of hashgacha pratis stories. Am I right? I mean, everybody can agree. How many times? And we don't even get upset because we right away know, yeah, I was meant to miss my flight. I was meant to bring home a case of milk from Crown Heights, and I come to my house in Connecticut and it's all sour. Hashgacha pratis. Hashgacha pratis. Everything is hashgacha pratis. We don't even think twice. How many people can't even say hashgacha pratis? Oh, it was an accident. It wasn't meant to be. I know. They don't even understand that it's hashgacha pratis. You know, so that the Rebbe taught us that everything, every challenge is an opportunity. And my father had a stroke one year between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. He was in the hospital. So first day Rosh Hashanah, unheard of, after the Suda, I don't know if you remember, the Rebbe called the Farbrengen. And during the Farbrengen, the Rebbe pointed at my brother Simon, my oldest brother Simon Jacobson, and said, Zog l'chaim. And it was for my father. And after the Farbrengen, Rabbi Label Groner said to my brother Simon, you know the Rebbe Farbrengt for your father today. This was the reason the Rebbe Farbrengt today. Well, wow, what a schus. Anyway, Erev Yom Kippur comes, my father's still in the hospital. Of course, we wrote to the Rebbe, you know. So the Rebbe was giving out lekach. The Rebbe told the maskiris, the secretaries, go call Simon, Geruv Simon. They called Simon. The Rebbe gave him 2 big pieces of lekach, one for him, one for the tata, and he says, Zog the tata, that when he finishes his shlichus in the hospital, he'll be released. So my brother runs to the hospital, gives my father the lekach, tells him the message from the Rebbe, and my mother, Mrs. Jacobson, the quintessential miftzah, has her shopping bag with her miftzah paraphernalia. She never leaves home without it, and she's running up and down the halls doing miftzayim. So my father finally calls her back. He says to my mother, you know, I think the Rebbe told me I have a shlichus here. I have a shlichus. Though I appreciate your efforts, the Rebbe told me. Anyway, comes the day after Yom Kippur. The Rebbe sends Rabbi Charakov to the hospital to visit my father, Bikar Chaylim, in his name. And Rabbi Charakov says to my father, No, the Rebbe wants to know, did you finish your shlichus yet? What are you still doing here? So you never find yourself in a situation that you have a shlichus, you're sent somewhere. And this is the famous sikha that the Rebbe said about Yosef HaTzadik. I'm sure you all heard it, but when I learned this sikha, it changed my whole way I look at my life. You know, Yosef HaTzadik, very, very briefly, is sold by his brothers. He's sold as a slave. Then he's put into prison. And we all know the whole story. And 22 years later, he is reunited with his brothers. And though he tells them he's going to forgive, he forgives them, they doubt it. They really think he's going to take revenge. And he finally says something to the Rebbe says, first of all, the avodah he must have done to be able to look at his brothers and honestly forgive them. How many people can have that level of forgiveness? So it must be that Yosef HaTzadik had sich gut ausgearbeitet those years and really worked on himself and came to one very important realization, says the Rebbe. And he tells this to the brothers. You think you sold me, but guess what? You didn't sell me. I was sent. The Eibush just sent me here. I wasn't sold. You think you sold me. I was sent here. So the Rebbe says to us, you have to look at your life. Were you sold? Are you a victim of your circumstances? Or do you look at your challenges and moments of darkness in your life and you say, you know what? I was sent. Was I sold or was I sent? This is the way that Rebbe changed our paradigm of how we look at things. That we always ask ourselves this. Itaka was sent. I wasn't sold. I was sent here. I have something I have to do here. And this was like one of the Rebbe's mantras to us, that we always have to look at everything that we were sent. There's a shlichus, and that not reingefallen in a blotte. You were sent. You weren't sold. You were sent. So remember the famous Shirley Chisholm. Who remembers Shirley Chisholm? Anybody? Famous, right? Okay. So Shirley Chisholm, I was telling my sister was talking to shluchos today. So she calls me up, Freida, quick, I need material. I'm like, I don't have much material, but I'll tell you a good story. That every challenge has an opportunity. So Shirley Chisholm became the first Black woman congressman. Now she gets elected. The white racist bigots who are congressmen are not very happy that a Black woman was elected. So what do? When they give out the jobs, they appoint her the Department of Agriculture. Now, the front page of every newspaper, I don't know if you guys remember, but my father, because he's a journalist, my father pointed it out. What was the front page? Does a tree grow in Brooklyn? In other words, where is there a blade of grass in Crown Heights that she should be the head of the Department of Agriculture? What are we living in farmlands? You even see a flower in Crown Heights, you know what I mean? So she was.
Yeah, you do.
Oh, a little bit. On the corner, they sell the flowers now. So she was humiliated. She was so insulted. Anyway, she's appointed to the Department of Agriculture, and she gets a call from the Rebbe's office. The Rebbe wants to meet with you. She didn't want to go. Why? When she was running for office, she asked the Rebbe to endorse her, and the secretary said the Rebbe doesn't endorse politicians. That's not what a Rebbe does, So she was insulted. He didn't want to endorse me. I'm not going to go. But then she says, you know what? Let me go. So she goes to meet with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says, congratulations. I hear you were appointed the head of the Department of Agriculture. And she thinks the Rebbe is making fun of her. So she says to the Rebbe, could you believe the humiliation and the slap in the face that they did to me? The Rebbe says, isn't there poverty in New York? Isn't there hunger? So many poor, hungry people. So use this to remedy the situation. So she's thinking, and she's, yeah, okay. She leaves. She thanks the Rebbe, and she goes. The next week, she's in Washington, D.C., and she sits down near Congressman Robert Dole of Kansas City. And he's bemoaning the fate of his farmers. He says, Ms. Chisholm, my farmers have so much surplus, they don't know what to do with it. They have no one to sell it to, and it's a catastrophe. Now the wheels begin to spin in her head. She's thinking, surplus, hunger. She makes a shidduch, and Shirley Chisholm, if you look into the Wikipedia, established the food stamp and WIC program in Brooklyn, in New York, which was, of course, copied across the country. That's the Rebbe. Every challenge, an opportunity. I mean, what could you say about that? This is the way the Rebbe thought. This is the Rebbe's mindset. For the Rebbe, this was a no-brainer. Amazing, right? Come on. I mean, I when I remember the story from years ago, I'm like, wow, the Shirley Chisholm story. But this is the story with the Rebbe, every challenge, opportunity, everything, you find yourself somewhere, you were put there. That's how the Rebbe taught us. And we don't even look at things differently anymore. We all think the same way. You meet any Lubavitcher? Yeah, you were stuck? And guess what? I met this lady and she had $1 and sure someone that, and we always have a story, right? And we always have a story. This is the story of our lives. This is the story of our lives. Let me see what else. So did I ever tell you the story of Pinchas Tights with the Knetch and the Tanya? Remember that story?
I don't.
You don't? What about you, Reichel? Anybody else? Or are we running out of time?
Chas v'sholom.
No, I don't want to overstep. Okay, what about the story of the Rishimis? With the Rebbe's Rishimis? I can't remember if I ever shared the Rishimis with the Frierdiker Rebbe's dream. Did I ever share that?
Just say it. It doesn't matter. We could hear it more than once.
I don't want to bore it. It's always hard to speak to our Chabadnikim because we know everything. That story I heard it. That story I know. That Beshekel we heard already. So tell me, I don't want to,
Freida, it can never be boring.
Okay, so should we do Iskashris or should we do the Rishimis? Let's do the Shemis. It's very, very, okay, let's do Ishkashas. Let's do Ishkashas. So Pinchas Teitz was a very good friend of my father. You know, he was the rabbi in Teaneck, New Jersey. But what he did was he would travel to the Soviet Union when, you know, it's still in the Iron Curtain, and he would bring chizuk to hundreds and hundreds of Yidden in Russia. And every time he went to the Rebbe, because he would get a bracha and the Rebbe would give him hayras. He's going to take a trip. And the Rebbe asks him, can you do me a favor? He says, of course. The Rebbe takes down a Tanya, hands it to Teitz, and says, I want you to share it in 2 places in Russia. The Rebbe tells him 2 places. Share my Tanya, and then you'll bring it back. Very good. Now, Teitz had a packer. A packer means somebody that looks through his suitcase, that nothing should be suspicious because he could be arrested or tossed out or not let in. So his packer sees the Tanya, opens up the front page, and he realizes this is just not any Tanya. This is the Rebbe's personal Tanya. It says the Rebbe's name inside the cover. So he says to Teitz, Rabbi Teitz, you can't take this Tanya. The Schneersons are blacklisted by the Russians. They'll see a Tanya with Schneerson's name. They'll either confiscate it, they won't let you in, they'll arrest you. It's a dangerous thing. You can't take it. So Rabbi Teitz calls up Rabbi Charikov, and he says, Rabbi Charikov, could you give the Rebbe a message? I can't take the Tanya. And he tells him why. Rabbi Charikov says to Teitz, do you think the Rebbe would put you in danger? If the Rebbe told you to take the Tanya, you take the Tanya. So he says, okay. And he packs the Tanya. He comes to Russia, he follows instructions, he goes to the Chabad shul. And the way you did it in those days, you went in, you signaled the guys, you know, I have a message from the Zayda, because they used to call the Rebbe the Zayda. And when they wrote letters, they also wrote, Dear Zayda. And they would meet in a park or in a public place and make sure no one's following them. So 2 Chabadnikim meet him in the park. He sits down with them and he says, the Rebbe asked me to show you his Tanya. They take the Tanya and they begin, you know, moving the pages, and they see a knetch. You know what a knetch, when you read a book, you fold the page, right? They open it up, and there the Alter Rebbe says, you meet a Sitra Achre. What do? You run as fast as you can away from the Sitra Achre. Mi leifta weg, the Alter Rebbe writes. As fast as you can. The 2 Chabadnikim, they go nuts. They said, we can't believe it. He says, what? They said, you see the knetch? They say to Rabbi Teitz. A few months ago, they opened up the visas to allow some Jews to leave. So we wrote to the Rebbe, to the Zayda, saying, should we leave? Should we apply for the visa, or is it too dangerous? And the Rebbe just gave me the answer. You meet the Sitra Achra, run as fast as you can. We're going to apply for visas. We're leaving. Now, Rabbi Teitz looks at them like they're Meshugoyim. A knetch and a Tanya, and you're going to endanger the lives of your whole family by applying for a visa? But he doesn't want to say anything. He says, Poland Meshugoyim. Crazies.
Yeah.
Oh, he takes the Tanya back, and he goes to the next city. He does the same shtiklach, meet in the park. He hands them the Tanya, and they're looking through, and they get all excited. They see a knetch, they open up, and there the Alter Rebbe writes, at times you meet the Sitra Achra, and you might be tempted to run away, but no, says Alter Rebbe, fight, confront that Sitra Achra, fight, stay and fight, hold your ground. The 2 Chabadnikim, wow. He says, what now? He said he tells the same thing. A few months ago, he wrote to the Zayda, to the Rebbe, asking if we should leave. And we got our answer, not to leave, to stay. And Rabbi Teitz told my father he was going crazy. Over a knetch and a Tanya? You're going to endanger your family? You're not going to apply for a visa? It's horrifying. He takes back the Tanya, he comes back to America, and always after his trip, he would go back to the Rebbe and give a report. He goes into Yechidus, he returns the Tanya, and he says to himself, I cannot tell the Rebbe the story. The Rebbe will be so upset that two families are endangering their lives because of an accidental knesh that the Rebbe may have made years ago. I can't tell the Rebbe anything, he says to himself. And he's telling the Rebbe, and the Rebbe's waiting, and the Rebbe's waiting, and he's not saying anything. Finally, the Rebbe looks at him and says, "Dus gegeben die Tanya? You gave the Tanya to the two towns?" And he says, "Sicher, Rebbe." And the Rebbe says, "Und sie haben gesehen die Knetchen?" They saw the pen pages. And he said he fell through the floor. He could not believe what the Rebbe asked him. And he said to the Rebbe, yeah, they saw the Knetchen. So that's his kashrus. For some people, it's a Knetchen de Tanya. Another person, it's a igris, a oyel, a story, an encounter. But that's his kashrus. It comes from sometimes the oddest places. But anyone who's mekushet some Rebbe, and that's how they mekushet, it's an unbelievable thing. It's an unbelievable thing. This is his kashrus. This is what it is. A knetch and a tanya. Who would believe it? But that's what it is. Someone who's open to his kashrus, you don't know how they're going to get a message from the Rebbe. You just don't know how. Don't know how. So it's getting late. I have more. I have the story of the Rishimis, but I have something else I thought I'll share. We'll end with this. Unless you want to hear more, we could always do more, but let me end with this. So in 1989, Parshas Koirach, which just passed, right? 5 years before Gimmel Tammuz, there was a Farbrengen. And the Rebbe said something that people thought was a very nice Chassidish Vertele. They enjoyed it. The Rebbe smiled, everyone heard it, a nice Vertele from the Rebbe. And this is what the Rebbe said at this Farbrengen. That there was a Gadol b'Yisrael, and he comes to Gan Eden. Anybody hear this? I don't want to be repetitious. Okay, you heard it? Oh, he comes to the Gan Eden, and he doesn't want to go in. He says to the Rebbe, I am not going into Gan Eden, and the Rebbe is telling the story until Mashiach comes. So what happens? The Rebbe says, the heavenly court sends out a Shena special matana, and when the tzaddik sees the matana, he can't resist, and he goes into Gan Eden. Now, when people heard the story at the Farbrengen, they speculated, who was this tzaddik? So people said it was Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev, because there's a story told from him that when he came up, he said, I'm not going into Gan Eden till Mashiach comes. And then from the Gan Eden, he heard the song of Amen Yehei Rabba, and it was so mesmerizing that Levi Yitzchak Barditchev jumped right into Gan Eden. Now, when the Rebbe, this is an addendum. This is not the story that the Rebbe told. The first part is the story. Now, when the Rebbe told the story, the Rebbe smiled, and the Rebbe said, you know what? There might be a way around this. There might be a way around it. What's the way around it? So the Rebbe says that you make a neder al da'as rabin. You make a vow in front of everyone. Gans klal Yisrael. What's the halacha, says the Rebbe? That if you make a vow in front of one person and you change your mind, you say, Reichel, I changed my mind. I'm going to eat meat. I made a vow not to eat meat, but I'm going to eat meat. But if you make a neder al das rabim, says the Rebbe, and thousands of Yidden hear you, the Shulchan Aruch says you can't be mevatel such a neder. Because what, you're going to go over to thousands and thousands of Jews and say, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. You can't do it. So the Rebbe says the way around it is that tzaddik makes a neder al das rabim, and then he won't be able to go into Gan Eden until Mashiach comes, because he made a neder. And the Rebbe smiled, and he finished this Farbrengen. Very nice. Now, my brother Yosef Yitzchak and I were very close, and we have a little private WhatsApp. And he told me last week, my brother Yosef Yitzchak Jacobson, my baby brother. He told me last week he's going to Eretz Yisrael. Why? He was asked to speak to the survivors of the massacre of the Nova Festival. And I'm like, Yosef Yitzchak, that is like one very, very difficult speech to give. It's like giving a speech to the Holocaust survivors as they're coming out of Auschwitz. It's an impossible task. What are you going to say to them? Leave it to him. It was Shabbos, so he couldn't tape it. So afterwards, I say to him, Nu, how was it? He said it was very, very good, but very, very heartbreaking. Very heartbreaking, he told me. Anyway, he's on the plane. This is my brother's WhatsApping me this whole thing. He's sending me a WhatsApp. He says, Freida, you will not believe what happened on the way home. What happened? He says, I'm sitting near a Yiddilah from Morocco. Let me read the name of the Yiddilah. His name is Reb Moshe Biskalo. And we're schmoozing about the Rebbe. Gimmel Tammuz is coming. His father, David Biskalo, translated the Tanya in Spanish. He had his bar mitzvah by the Rebbe, and he's telling me shtiklach about the Rebbe. And we're talking about the Rebbe. And he tells me this crazy story. Moshe Biskalo is telling my brother. 15 years ago, he had a very big problem. So who did he go to? He's a Moroccan Jew, a Svardisha. There's a Makubal there called Reb Moshe Ben Toiv, and he's nicknamed the Tzaddik of the Mezuzahs. You know, by the Svardim, my father-in-law was a rabbi for 50 years of the Svardim. They have the kameis and the amulets. They're very into and it's halakha stuff. So when you have a problem, you go to this Makubal. He's the Rebbe of the Mezuzahs. And he says to the Makubal his problem. And the Makubal says to him, this is after Gimmel Tammuz, says, you need to go to the Rebbe at the Oyel. You need to go to the Rebbe at the Oyel for this. Now, the Makubal didn't know that he was bar mitzvah by the Rebbe and he had a relationship with the Rebbe. So he says to the Makubal, was epis? Like, why are you sending me to the Rebbe when I came to you? So he says, I'll tell you why. A few nights ago, I had a dream. I had a dream that there was a tzaddik, and he refused to go into Gan Eden until Mashiach comes. He tells, and this was the Rebbe that I saw in my dream. He tells Reb Moshe. And he says, so I can tell you one thing, that if you go to the Oyel, the gates, every gate of heaven is open over there. Every one of the gates is open. Because they're waiting for the, okay, they're waiting for the Rebbe to go in. So the gates are all open there. And that's just what he tells him. Now, my brother didn't tell this guy that there was a sikha in 1989. The guy doesn't even know about the sikha that the Rebbe said. And I'm not going to say anything more because we will all draw our own conclusions about this. Because I'm not qualified to explain this story. I'm just not. But we draw our own conclusions. What the Rebbe said, what the Makubal said, and we know what the conclusion is. So I'll end off with one thing from Adin Steinsaltz. And if you want, we could talk more if you're in a mood, whatever. But Adin Steinsaltz said that after Gimmel Tammuz, he gave this magnificent lecture. And he said that for thousands of years, the sun rose every day. And then the sun set. And what do people do when the sun sets? It's dark, you light a candle. So for thousands of years, we're always lighting candles, he says. He says, what happened on Gimmel Tammuz, he said. He says the sun set. So what does a chassid do? We become the channel to light the Rebbe's candles. That's what we have to do, he said. Every one of us has to light the channel, the Rebbe's light through our candles. Every one of us has that shlichus to light those candles. And that's what we have to do. The Rebbe told us we have to bring Mashiach, and that's what we have to do. Just one more little thing. You know, after Gimmel Tammuz, in my community in Connecticut, everyone is asking me, why did the Rebbe appoint a successor? Why didn't the Rebbe appoint a successor? So I had the very typical answer that in Chabad, a Rebbe is not appointed. Either you're born a Rebbe or you're not born a Rebbe. It doesn't matter if you're a cousin, a son, a relative. Either you're born a Rebbe or you're not born a Rebbe. That was my answer. So there was no Rebbe because there's only one Rebbe. But now I changed my answer. When someone asks me now, how come the Rebbe didn't appoint a successor? I say, the Rebbe appointed a successor. Really? Where's the successor? You're the successor. I'm the successor. We are the successors of the Rebbe. And they look at me, and I'm like, yeah. Every chassid a shtickle Rebbe. And that's why the Tzemach Tzedek had so many sons, but who became the Rebbe the youngest? The Rebbe Marash, right? Reb Shmuel. But do you know the Rebbe said, why did the Tzemach Tzedek write letters to all of his sons and write them quite Kedushas Admor? Every one of his sons used to get a letter and he would call them a Rebbe. Quite Kedushas Admor, this one, quite Kedush. And the Rebbe said, why? Why would the Tzemach Tzedek do that when he knew the youngest would be the successor? Because the Rebbe said that the Tzemach Tzedek said every chassid is a Rebbe. Every chassid is a Rebbe. And that's why he called his son the Rebbe. Everyone is a Rebbe. And when the Rebbe said to us, I can't do anything, it's up to you, that's who we are now. We're the successors. We have to carry the candle to the Rebbe and be the shluchim of the Rebbe, wherever we are. And I think that's what we have to do. And let's end off with a bracha that we should see the Rebbe dal lamata v'yigalenu b'toich hanirev hanigla. We should see the gula mitzvah hashlemus al yedei Mashiach tzedkenu now.
Amen.
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 Thank you.
Wow.
Freida. Wow.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Does everybody still want to hear my poem?
Absolutely.
Or
Freida.
over Zman
Of course.
Batal Karbonai?